Cool, thanks, Henry. So yes, first of all, I would like to talk through the principles that I've learned. So the first one is that discovery for me was definitely an ongoing process. Um, I think there's always value in asking more questions and then asking more again. And I found that people were so willing to help and didn't really expect me to have a full grasp of the problem area or the industry because I didn't. Um, so that was a great thing to learn. And also, one of the things that I think was really valuable from this course is when we were asked to sort of consider the mindset of our users. That is something that I hadn't really considered before. So, sort of thinking about how this person would be feeling when they use the tool, and how it could benefit them from a personal perspective, rather than just sort of thinking about it from a business use case or something that you could put in a report and then file away. I think the aspect of relieving stress was something that I think is actually a really useful thing to look at. Also, hypothesis over features. Again, I've come from a background where in product we have been very focused on just feature delivery. So I think going forward, I feel a lot more confident in really taking a step back and asking the question of why, and of what value will this actually be. So that's been great as well. And then finally, to just test, iterate, and repeat. I think this is definitely part of the course I enjoyed the most. Having that kind of creativity, but then also going back to the drawing board and making changes, and then putting that to users again, and kind of hearing their feedback, and then saying to you, that's actually much better, and I see it working like that as well. So that was really useful and great. The processes that I followed is understanding whether or not this problem is a vitamin or a painkiller. That's another really great analogy that I got from this course. Validate the minimum viable offer as well. So at first, I was thinking about this in quite a robust way, and actually trying to drill that down and distill it into one thing that could actually deliver value straight away was quite a difficult process, because the problem space that I'm working in, there are so many large market incumbents as well, that you kind of think to yourself, is it going to be useful to just deliver one thing? Are people going to sort of like sniff at it and think that's just too small? Or there's so many other tools out there that are much bigger. And also experimenting and learning. Again, I think those two go hand in hand. So that's been a great part of this process as well. I'm just going to try and move my notes over slightly. Sorry, 1 second. So I was going to make this smaller. Yes, thank you.
Don't worry, it's a little bit fiddly.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, there we go.
So my problem statement. So within construction, there are many different phases that each individual piece of an asset needs to go through. We believe that construction managers are frustrated with the manual, slow, and inaccurate processes in place to track these assets from design to install. Their ideal solution is to be able to see real-time status updates for both individual pieces and a whole collection of assets. Accurate and timely tracking that would reduce human error and reporting timelines. Ultimately, to relieve stress, reduce project overcost, freeing up valuable time. So hypothesis 1, current asset tracking processes are frustrating, time-consuming, ineffective, and leave wide room for error and cost increase. So I did 6 user interviews with people directly involved in the construction project asset tracking. So the initial discovery calls are probably the scariest part of the process. And whilst I've been really lucky to been able to lean on people I know who work in the industry, I felt very aware that I didn't know anything. So that was a really useful, but obviously quite nerve-wracking stage of this process. So the discovery calls generally confirmed my hypothesis. They also really helped me to contextualize the problems in terms of what other solutions were out there and the ways in which that they weren't solving this problem. The conversations were also really useful because they mentioned things that I hadn't thought of, like the client side potential of a tool like this, where project directors of private developers would also have use for something like this, because they share the same stresses that digital construction managers have, who were my core niche to begin with. So that's something I didn't really fully explore within the scope of this project at this point in time, but it's something that I'm going to be looking at going forward. So my blue ocean strategy, I think I wanted to include this because I thought this was a really interesting part of it for me. At first I didn't really understand how to use this canvas. I didn't know whether I was just kind of looking at the strengths of my idea and slightly ignoring all the other ones. So this was my first iteration. And because there was such huge market incumbents as well, I wasn't sure exactly whether to plot all of their perks. And I didn't know if that would outweigh the focus on what I was trying to do. But so this was my second iteration. So the one that I included was the fact that a lot of the market incumbents have massive, robust feature suites, and whilst that can be a perk, it can also be overwhelming and really costly as well for a subscription. So this was my lean canvas. I won't talk too much through that, but I can send it to you afterwards. So yeah, hypothesis 2. We can attract our niche with the following compelling minimum viable offer. We help digital construction managers achieve the accurate and reliable tracking of assets with QR codes. So building a simple landing page to qualify and survey leads, 5 to 10% survey completion from outreach campaign, and then validate MVO's foundations, product vision and strategy moving forward. So this was my type form. And the responses that I got from this were really interesting as well. So some of the most interesting answers came from my question of how have you or your company tried to solve this in the past? I had a varied set of responses from we ignore the issue, or we use software but the interpretability of that software is limited, to we just use documents to support it. Other people said, we've tried manual processes and pushing the onus onto the subcontractor. We now write these processes into appointments and scope of services. So basically what this really told me was that there wasn't a consistent way that people were trying to approach this problem. Even sort of manually, it sounded that before every project they would agree some kind of hack together process with the trade contractors and then write that into the scope of work, or they would just ignore it. So hypothesis 3, we can validate that our specific solution resonates with our niche. So just wanted to quickly look at the customer journey map as well, because this was another thing that was a point at which I learned quite a lot. Again, I didn't really fully grasp the purpose of a map like this when I initially came to it, and the feedback that you gave me, Henry, was really useful. I did actually do a second iteration of this, but I couldn't find it, which is annoying. So I'll have to find that another time. So yeah, this was something that I struggled with at first because I wasn't really in the mindset of thinking about quick wins or gamification with the tool that I was thinking of. It's very much something I think that can only deliver value once it's been applied to a project. And that's sort of what I was focusing on. So really trying to think about the perspective of the emotional journey that my user would go through with a tool like this was something that I hadn't considered. But yeah, I did do a second iteration of this, but I'll have to try and find that. So yes, I'd like to talk about my prototype now. So I initially decided against doing a YouTube video of my prototype as part of an outreach campaign. And this was because I didn't really have a clear idea of how digital construction managers would expect a tool like this to look and work. So I wanted to really use them and lean on the people that I knew who worked in that space to help me build the prototype first, instead of me guessing and then putting something on YouTube that really didn't make any sense. So I kind of started with a very limited prototype, and then once I was able to put that in front of people, I really started drawing out useful bits of information. And I was really lucky because I could just continue to bother them and lean on them throughout this whole process. So initially I imagined that the digital construction managers would upload the massive data sheet and assign priorities in the QR codes and then send those out to the trade contractors. But actually, after more testing and more conversations, it emerged that the best process was going to be inviting the trade onto the project via the tool, and then allowing them to drop and drag different fields to add to their QR code, and then they would then print the QR code out and apply it to the piece of steel. This is because different types of assets require different fields, and the onus really needs to be on the trade to make sure that those fields are the ones that need to be on the QR code, on the QR card, sorry. And then they would then print that out and apply the label. So this is the point at which I arrived at thinking that in order for this to be of real value, there needs to be two separate user journeys. So what was going to be important for the digital construction managers instead was for them to be able to filter the information that is in the tool and then view the results based off that. So then they would view the QR card and then be able to change those filters and then view the progress as well. So what was important for them is really to look at not only the kind of minute details of individual pieces of assets, but also the bigger picture and progress tracking as well. So I've spent quite a lot of time working on my prototype now, and I did get to the point where I was considering, am I losing sight of the bigger picture? Am I getting too stuck down in the details? But then I realised, if these are the things that the users are feeding back to me straight away, then I think they're actually really quite important to consider. So yeah, I think that was really useful as well, because I think if your users are telling you something straight off the bat, then I think you're all kind of on the right track, and that is a really valuable piece of information. So I should act on it. So this was my my surveys. It felt quite strange surveying using this format, because when I was talking to them, I was getting feedback straight away. So I think I'll definitely use the PMF survey more when I do another outreach campaign to people I don't know, and sort of gather their feedback via this. But yeah, so for my next steps, I'm going to keep testing and keep iterating. I'm going to do an outreach campaign and try and contact people who I haven't spoken to before, who don't have an idea about what I'm trying to do. I think that would be really valuable as well, to see what their first impression of it is coming in completely cold. And then I want to build it out into something that's fully functional, using that tool that you mentioned called, and is it? I think I need to include an about me page, but I can send it afterwards.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Nice. Really good to see. Awesome prototype, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I remember working the first draft with you. It looks really good. Okay, cool. I'm just going to go through feedback on the case study and then sort of general comments. So principles, I thought this was really good. I also think, great that you went into a space you had no knowledge about. I think that's really bold and quite brave decision to make. And I suspect you actually got quite a lot out of that over other people, because, you really have to go from scratch, right? You really have to do the validation work. Yeah, I like you customize your points as well, right? You're talking about sort of test, iterate, repeat. Really good to talk through. I think also just for yourself, but also sharing with other people, like, why are these important, and mentioning, this is an enjoyable process as well. I think it's really important, because all of that iteration work is difficult. It's easy to not do it. So you have to make it fun for yourself and also for your team, right? If you're integrating this. Good as well to see you really highlight that understanding of, like, we need to look at problems from, like, what's an internal problem versus external. So what's the emotional need, not just, the sort of user story you might write about it. Process, good again. I like to cut this down a bit, and actually I think you cut to the core really, which is the most important thing, which is vitamin versus painkiller. If you don't get that right, everything you do afterwards is very hard, if not impossible, if you're working on a vitamin. It's really good. Problem statement, good, but quite chunky. So I think, I'll come to this point a bit later. Always think about how people are really going to understand, like, take away one thing from anything you say. So yes, it's good to have it documented, and obviously it's helpful for you to sort of outline your points. But what's the one thing you'd want, let's say, a reader to take away? So keep it quite short. On the hypothesis one, discovery calls, yeah, discovery calls, they are intimidating. I think particularly if you're looking at an area you don't know. I think one good tactic for that is just be really curious, right? You just find it interesting. Like, why are they saying this? What's actually going on there? So I think the more you sort of make these things fun and focus on your curiosity, like the more you enjoy them, the more likely you are to actually do them. And again, congrats for doing them, I think, because it is intimidating in a new market. On the Blue Ocean, good, excellent. I thought really nice showing the progress as well. Because again, if say you're pitching this internally, you're showing with everything, here's how I really quickly learned something that's valuable for us as a business. Like, here's some visual progression in some way. However, I think that maybe what you should do is basically there's a lot of points that you would top at. It's unrealistic at the beginning. So maybe you could do, okay, why don't I do a Blue Ocean just for the next, let's say 3 months, for example, and see what would I really focus on there. Hypo 2, however, I think you sort of solved that already. So hypothesis 2, I think really interesting that you came out with this unique perspective on the QR code. And that really seems to be your USP as I see it, at least for the solution. And really good, sorry, second point, really, really good. You talked through the themes from the survey. Sorry, my internet's been terrible too. So really good that you, so I think the QR code could become your USP. I think that sort of simplicity. Secondly, I think really good you talked through the themes in the survey. So ultimately, you were telling stories. Here's what people have said. Here's the context they're in. It's really powerful for yourself, but also for obviously communicating like key ideas with a team. On the prototype, I think love the improvements, love the focus that's come with it on the QR code idea. One thing I was thinking about is obviously in the real world, what you would want to do is definitely observe people on a construction site. Right, you're going to see just the context in that case really determines what the solution might be. Things like big buttons, QR codes. It's simple. People can't type if they're running around construction site, that kind of thing. So I think that would be something you could mention, for example, or do in practice if it were the real thing. PMF survey, good, very good results, by the way. If you got somewhat disappointed from them already with the first version, I think really good results there. I think generally I'd sort of wrap up a few points though. I felt you didn't, obviously it's different, right? You're sort of pitching this to me versus, let's say, pitching this to stakeholders in a team. I didn't feel like you communicated why we were doing things, right? Sort of listing them. So it's like, okay, like what is an MBO? Why is it important? What is a Blue Ocean? Why is that important? PMF survey and engine, I was like, this stuff looks cool, but I wouldn't know what you're talking about if you weren't.
Okay, yeah.
I know you're testing a prototype, right, in some way, but it's like, what is this like really clever framework she's using? So just speaking in really simple terms, like, without using clever lingo as well, just simply, so now we want to test, is the prototype the right thing to build as a solution? The way we did that, built a quick design prototype. We surveyed customers to determine what the next steps would be, what the next features would be, next iteration. So I think that would be something to really take away. I think on the simply the next steps, I think I would have liked to see some features in here. So it's like, here were the learnings I had from testing.
Okay, yeah.
Here is a couple of features that I think we should build next, for example. And then I think general points. I think leadership is. I think a few things I think are really important to take that next step as a leader. So things like, first explain things in really simple terms. So again, it's like we're talking about user interviews. What's the outcome here? Like, why do people care about this? If you're pitching this, right? If you're explaining what you're up to a stakeholder, what's the MBO? What's the PMF survey? Like, what are these things? What's the outcome we're looking for? Now it's implicit, right? And I know why we're doing them. Other people don't know. To make that really simple and clear.
Yeah.
I think second point linked as well, simplicity. So again, with the problem statement, really simple one-liner. And third thing, I think practicing your storytelling. So I felt there's a slight lack of narrative and like linking of the points of like, here's the process and here's where we started and here's how, we got this learning from using tools, and therefore I wanted to go and test that in the real world with an MBO, for example. To see the difference, it's like, everything just makes loads of sense now because it's this nice narrative. That's really, really, really key leadership. So again, obviously, you and I in the case study, different environment, but just something to really think about. That's really to practice in the real world. And I think Eloise, just some, final points over the 8 weeks. I think really good persistence. A lot of testing you've done. I know you've spoken to a lot of people. You've been smart with that as well. You've leveraged like these relationships you've built. Really good part of B2B as well. And that's delivered results for you, right? It's super easy for you a lot easier to get these iterations done. So really good work there. Generally really good participation on the, I'll try my video again. Really good participation in all of the sessions we've had, which, big help for me. I think also good part of leadership, right, is being fun, engaging on any session you're in. Great prototyping work. I think you've clearly learned a lot from this, it seems, from the case study.
So much.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable, right? Seeing it's easy to read about this stuff, like, you need to iterate and repeat. Very few people do it and actually understand why you need to do it. So I think that's great to see. Also, I really liked you mentioned sort of I'm worrying about losing sight of the bigger picture. So key, right? The more senior you get, you're gonna have fewer people to sort of run ideas by. So just being good at catching yourself and zooming out, I think it's really, really, really key. I think that's it. As I said, I think in terms of leadership, a couple of things. So just simplify stuff, tell a story, and just always remember you're also gonna have to repeat these things. Like MBA, you explain it once. You're gonna have to do it a few weeks after, repeating the same key messages. Good. I think final things. What do you feel are the next steps? Like, what do you want to take from this into your day-to-day work, or is it just pursuing the idea at the moment?
I think this has given me a lot of tools to take away, and I think what I plan to do is on the recommended reading for each of the weeks, I'm going to get all those books, because I think there's so many things that we covered, so many different frameworks and tools that we touched on, but I think I need to learn about them a little bit more before I feel really confident in bringing them back to the business. So I think whilst this was great for like a taster session and all of those, I think I really want to get stuck into them. So,
I think that makes a huge amount of sense, because I think that's reflected in the lack of storytelling. I think the more comfortable you are with these concepts, the more you can sort of dive into them and simplify. Right, the more you know something, the more you actually can explain it in simple terms. I think that makes quite a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of my next step, just in terms of becoming a more confident product leader, as you said, and kind of because those tools and those frameworks do not exist at all in my business at the moment. It's very we just don't work in that way.
Yeah.
So I think this will make a massive difference for me and also for the work that we do as a team. So yeah, I'm really excited about those, and I think it's just been really good as a nice kind of confidence booster to kind of get some experience and stuff that I wouldn't really have experienced otherwise. All of that. Speaking to users and learning how to use Figma properly. I mean, my team are quite surprised when we had to use Figma the other day, and they were like, "Oh my god, how do you know how to do this?" And I was like, "Well, I've been learning." So I think that's been incredibly useful, and it's given me the confidence to use to try and learn another tool like that one that you mentioned, Adalo. I haven't actually managed to get into that yet, but that's kind of next on my list as well. So yeah, kind of having the confidence to not be really daunted by a tool. I think that's been my main takeaway.
And that's great to hear. I think that's exactly where you're at. Yeah, I think it's build a bit more of like sort of theoretical foundation, and I think you can use that then to really use that plus the extra confidence you have now just to go after things a bit more. And I think yeah, I think it's actually a really good stead. But awesome. Well, look, I think, thanks for the case study. I think really nice to see. Also awesome to see the prototype as well. And we'll hopefully see you on some of our community sessions in the next few weeks.
Yes.